Brace yourself, my breakdown besties, because here's a special announcement for you. This past Sunday saw the release of my breakdown of the movie Bloodshot, inspired by the comic of the same name. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 outbreak means that a lot of people aren't going to see the movie. But if you were interested in seeing it and learning more about it in general, here's a good stay-at-home safe way of doing so. I treat the movie just like any other comic that I've broken down. The only difference is that it is a movie and not a comic. Just visit Google or YouTube, type in Breaking Down Bloodshot, and enjoy. Or swing by the Breakdown Facebook page. I've posted a link there. Thank you for your time, everyone. Now, onto your regularly scheduled podcast broadcast. Maverick and his old Team X teammate, Victor Creed, have a history going back decades. In this string of episodes, we've seen them save each other's lives, taunt and tease each other, and put each other's lives in danger. But we have not seen modern-day Victor Creed, now known as the villainous Sabretooth, encounter the modern-day Maverick, now sporting active mutant powers, and a few close friends. Both of these men are very similar to who they used to be, and both are very different. Let's hope that Maverick has changed enough that he can stop Sabretooth from killing Elena. My name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown, episode 10.7, Fractured Lives. Issue 7 picks up right where Issue 6 ended. Maverick is miles below the streets of New York City in the tunnels that run through its foundations. Sabretooth had lured Elena there, and Maverick followed. The gases from biological matter breaking down forced Elena, and subsequently Maverick, to wear oxygen tanks and forego any form of explosive weapon. The tunnels are also totally dark, giving Sabretooth, with his enhanced vision, sight, and smell, an edge. Elena fought bravely, but Sabretooth disarmed her, and last we saw, slashed his claws across her back. That's when Maverick showed up, horrified to find Sabretooth standing over Elena's fallen form. Sabretooth grunts. Him being here means that Gregor survived this trap, yeah? Too bad Ivanova won't be so lucky. Sabretooth picks her up with one hand and tosses her behind him. Elena's body bounces off the curved wall before landing in sewer water. With Maverick's attention on Elena's body, Sabretooth rushes in, eager to see what, exactly, Maverick thinks that he can do to stop him. Maverick steps back and twists his wrists, activating his new weapon. Pencil-thin needles fire out of Maverick's gauntlets, peppering Sabretooth's chest. Once they're embedded, the needles deliver a huge shock of electricity, forcing even Sabretooth to fall back. Maverick is impressed and horrified to find Sabretooth is still standing, though. The needles were designed to deliver their shots at regular intervals for 3 minutes. They should take down anyone short of, the Hulk. While those needles have delayed Sabretooth, Maverick needs to take advantage of that. He pulls out another set of needles and attaches them to the gauntlets. Then he asks Creed, why did he do this? Why would he lure Elena and he down here? It's not really his style to root around old grudges. Sabretooth growls through the pain of the electricity. He's been wanting to scratch his old pal Rico, his nickname for Maverick, ever since he delivered Creed to the X-Men. On the word scratch, Sabretooth begins to dig his own claws into his body, ripping out what needles he can. Even Maverick thinks that that's unbelievable. He finishes attaching another set of needles to his gauntlet and opens fire with them. And then we move to Altamont Springs, Florida, where Brian Johnson, is out riding his bike. But let's take a look at our opening before we do travel. Author Jorge Gonzalez does a little bit of visual recapping here at the beginning, and that's great, honestly. We can see Elena's unconscious body near Sabretooth. We can see his claws and teeth, and we can see Maverick approaching cautiously. Even if we hadn't been following this book so far, we can immediately pick up on a wounded woman, who her assailant is, and who her hopeful hero is. Between Gonzalez writing this and penciler Jim Cheung's artistic framing, this opening works really well for me. Gonzalez also addresses why Sabretooth has gone to all of this effort. Maverick is right. Creed doesn't really pursue revenge, although he does definitely hold a grudge. Creed is long lived enough to know that he and those who wrong him will probably cross paths again, and he'll settle up then. But this confrontation with Elena isn't about Elena and her grudge at all, really. This is about Sabretooth punishing Maverick, who helped put him in the care of the X-Men. This is about Maverick, and I like that. I don't like commandeering Elena's only plot point, but this book is called Maverick, and it stars Maverick, not Elena. I like that Creed doesn't even really see Elena, who he's never met or faced before, as a threat. But Maverick is, and he knows that from their shared history. Maverick's electric needles are a clever solution for the location that they're in. We were told last issue that the gases in these tunnels are potentially explosive, so Elena and Maverick couldn't risk traditional weaponry. Needles that deliver a shock directly into their target minimizes the risk of explosion, but can still be powerful enough to actually affect Sabretooth. However, Cheung's artwork shows these things throwing off sparks like a downed electrical line. I am not a master of electricity by any means, but I do know that electrical sparks can ignite a gas or liquid, and the panels that have them in them make them look like these tunnels should be erupting. I feel like this is one part artistic error and one part necessity, though. If artist Cheung didn't put those sparks in, it would look like Maverick fired some needles into Creed and that he just fell back. We would be forced to rely on Gonzalez's narration boxes to understand the scene, and that would actually be okay in a more realistic comic. But, as I've said, the tone here remains uneven, and Maverick's book has not really sold itself on realism up to this point. This book constantly leans more towards a cartoony nature, and this bit here with the sparks is another case of it. We need to see these sparks in order to immediately understand the situation, and so they're meant to be a visual indicator of what's happening, as opposed to another couple of narration boxes. I am also pretty sure that by this point, the unconscious Elena has drowned in sewage. Let's move on. Young Brian Johnson is hopping on his bike, headed to the nearest comic store. Good luck with that in Altamont Springs. But he's thinking about Maverick's remission. He's still hurt by Maverick keeping it a secret and wants some time alone. But his younger sister, Jenny, rollerblades up to him, eager to tag along. Brian tries to turn her back, but she can tell that something is wrong. Brian scoffs. What does she know? It's not like she's the freak in the family. But Jenny doesn't see Brian, as a freak. Sure, he has powers, but she thinks that just makes him cool, like the Human Torch. It's kind of neat, actually. Brian argues that she's just a kid. She wouldn't understand the complex feelings that he has. God. No swearing. Teenagers. He then says that being sick nor being a mutant is what's bothering him. Jenny then asks if something happened with Maverick. Brian tells her to drop it, okay? And suddenly his powers flare up. He screams in pain and fights to get the electricity under control. Jenny reminds him that he's not supposed to use his powers in public. She says that she's going to tell their parents, and Brian replies that they already know. It's not like they can do anything, so just leave him alone. Jenny tries one more time to get him to stay around, reminding him of his promise to hook up their PlayStation. Brian leaves. He just wants to be alone. Since Brian's story began, there's been little done character-wise with his family. His parents are well-meaning but scared, and in X-Men Unlimited issue 8, Jenny was obnoxious but not too overbearing. I'm glad to see her again. After all, her life had been upended by all of the things that the Bradleys have had to do to protect themselves. How has she handled the move to Florida? How does she feel about Chris being a mutant? How does she feel about the cloud of imminent death that looms over his teenage head, ready to claim his life at any moment? Well, at least we know now that she thinks that being a mutant is cool, if nothing else. I would say that Jenny is lonely here. Again, she had to move as well and leave behind her school and friends. Perhaps she had trouble adjusting, and so she reaches out to her older brother, who does also appear to be friendless. But Chris is still in a really negative headspace, unable to enjoy having powers, and has been hurt by Maverick's secrets. I like the irony that Maverick, whose name means an independent-minded person, has kind of adopted Elena and Chris as a surrogate family of sorts, while Chris, who actually has a family, is pushing them away, becoming more of a Maverick in his own right. I mean Brian Johnson, the totally normal human who is definitely not mutant Chris Bradley. No swearing. I hope the Friends of Humanity do not listen to this podcast. No swearing. Back in the sewers of New York, Maverick's second volley of needles serves only to piss Sabretooth off. He growls and pounces, his claws raking across Maverick's gauntlets, destroying the needle-firing mechanism. He runs a bit, looking to draw Sabretooth away from Elena, but he's coming up to an impasse. Maverick ditches his bandolier of extra needles, jumps onto a ladder that's like 6 feet off the ground, and I don't understand why you would design a ladder to do that, but he manages to reach temporary safety. He then activates a booster field, which will magnify any energy that he absorbs tenfold. This is a good thing, because the 3 minutes on those needles is up, and Sabretooth is caught up with him. He grabs Maverick by the ankle, slamming his face into the ground and accidentally charging his foe up. Maverick swings, and the force of his blow sends Sabretooth into the brick and or concrete wall. Like 3 feet into the wall. Sabretooth's healing factor is already repairing the damage that's been done to him. He had heard that Maverick's powers were back, but they can't do that kind of damage. What, is he using some kind of cheap booster crap? That doesn't impress him. He charges again, and Maverick braces himself for the attack, but a wave of nausea hits him, followed by a seizure. This leaves him totally open to Sabretooth's assault, his claws tearing through Maverick's outer layer of armor. The only thing that Maverick can do is fight to stay conscious under the barrage of blows. In Altamont Springs, Brian returns home. He's realized that he has no right to make demands of Maverick. This is his illness, and he has to accept that. As he enters the house, his mom informs him that dinner, a delicious plate of lasagna, will be ready soon. He passes for now, promising to eat later because he is still recovering from bronchitis back in issue 4, and then goes to his room. His mother, Rose, starts to cry. She's just so scared for her son. Her husband, Frank, does his best to comfort her. They need to be strong, for their son's sake. I'm not sure if Rose and Frank are so comfortable in their new lives as the Johnsons that they would have stopped using their actual names of Marion and Bob, so this could be a continuity error, or it could be a totally plausible plot element. Brian's sister, Jenny, was originally named Kathy, too, if you're keeping track. And I am keeping track. I'm watching you, Mr. Gonzalez. Sabretooth has torn away most of Maverick's body armor, leaving him only the thin silver armor underneath. He's ready to rip Maverick open and pulls back his claws for one last good swipe. But that gives Maverick an opening. He slams a charged-up fist into Maverick's chest, unwilling to just lay down and die. The pair exchange blows for a panel, but it's several blasts from Elena's synaptic disruptor that temporarily down Sabretooth. Maverick is elated to see her alive, thank God. But she immediately berates him for following her into this mess. This is her quest, not his, and if she dies on it, then so be it. This is not what Maverick was expecting to hear, especially after saving her life. He then tries to talk her into leaving while they have a chance, but Sabretooth is back up and he slams into them both. "Man," he asks, "how is it that playing possum always works?" However, getting in close like that means being an easy target for Elena. She lands several shots with her disruptor, paralyzing Sabretooth. Then she steps forward and engages her psi powers, intending to destroy Sabretooth's mind. In order to accomplish this, Elena must first get past Sabretooth's mental defenses, but he's pretty used to having telepaths in his mind. Elena projects an astral image of herself into his mind in the hopes of finding a way through those defenses. What she finds in that darkness disturbs her. Rabbits. Dozens, maybe hundreds of rabbits run through Sabretooth's unconscious mind. They pass her by, and Elena finds herself above a darkened cell. A small boy, a young Victor Creed, is chained in that small space. The door to the cell opens, and Creed's father tosses in a small rabbit. "You kill what you catch," his father calls down, "and you eat what you kill." Elena contemplates entering the cellar and visiting the child, but she then realizes that it's a trap. Sabretooth wants her to go inside. The door to the cellar suddenly slams shut and she moves on. The darkness surrounding her turns into a tunnel of red and torn flesh, like the bodies of Sabretooth's victims. Then it turns into faces and screams and more blood, each one another helpless person. The voices tell her to leave, urging her to flee, but something forces her to pause. One face seems to get larger, and she recognizes her mother. Elena is so shocked, so horrified and disgusted by this, that she immediately severs the psychic link between her mind and Sabretooth's. Elena, Sabretooth, and Maverick are all buffeted by the psychic pain, although Elena and Sabretooth's actual bodies go flying because of it. Maverick fights to clear his head. That telepathic burst triggered another seizure in him. But how? Why? Maverick guesses that when Elena saved him back in issue 1, their psychic bond must have remained. This would explain why he felt her pain just now, as well as the burst of pain that he suffered last issue after Sabretooth slashed Elena's back. Maverick has to cut his armchair science session short, though, because he can hear Sabretooth growling again. He needs to charge up, so Maverick punches the wall. Burning pain and flickering energy burst from his hands, melting through his gauntlets. The pain is so intense, his powers are freaking out again. Now his ally is out of commission, and his powers are freaking out, and fatigue is setting in. As nice as it would be to lay his hands on Sabretooth's face and melt it right the no swearing fuck off, Maverick knows that he would get torn open in the process. It is time for him to leave. Maverick turns to a water pipe and presses a hand against it, creating a leak in it. Then he dashes across the tunnel and grabs a yellow steam line, which Maverick identified last issue on his way down into the tunnels, remember? Sabretooth follows Maverick, thinking that he's going to kill them all with this stunt. But Maverick tears open the steam line and aims it at Sabretooth, knocking him back into the weakened water line. That impact shatters the line further, and it is like a dam bursting. Sabretooth is pounded by the suddenly released water and is swept away. Maverick grabs Elena with his legs, which is probably the least believable thing here to me, and he wraps an elbow around a pipe, locking his hands together. He rides out the mini-flood, and, once it has passed, he drops to the ground. First thing he then does is vomit. Secondly, he sighs in relief as the energy in his hands dissipates. They're burned, but at least they're cool to the touch again. Maverick then rushes over to Elena and gives her a once-over. He suspects that she may have internal bleeding and her arm is definitely broken. But her breathing is shallow, so she's alive. and her pupils are dilated, and she's generally unresponsive. Elena has survived her battle with Sabretooth, but it has left her in a coma. As sucky an ending as that is for Elena, I do kind of like that a sucky ending happened. I mean, being in a coma is way better than being dead, which is generally where a fight with Sabretooth gets you. However, Elena is clearly going to have a battle to return to herself, if that even happens before this comic ends. I wonder if her psychic link to Maverick could be used to now bring her back from near death. I mean, they would probably need like another telepath, but still. Anyways, the reason that I like this is because the fight did something. There is a consequence here. If Maverick and Elena challenged Sabretooth, fought him, and then escaped both unharmed and unchanged, well, then what would the point have been? Why bother telling that story? This ending reinforces Maverick's dislike of Sabretooth. It will force him to take care of Elena now that she is mentally absent, and that will hopefully bring them closer together as friends. The real question for me is whether Elena will give up her vendetta against Sabretooth once she's recovered. That said, I do have mixed feelings on the actual fight itself. After Maverick's initial attack, Maverick and Sabretooth's fight is really just them trading punchies with little thought or planning happening. I'm annoyed that both Maverick and Elena lose their breathing masks, but then suffer no consequences for doing so. And when Maverick punches Sabretooth into the wall, he goes like, into the wall. Sabretooth isn't super tough. He is still vulnerable to high force impacts. He would have splattered all over that wall. And sure, his healing factor would have brought him back eventually, but he wouldn't just shrug it off with some blood on his face, a smart remark, and then get back into the fight. I'm also annoyed that there's no follow-up to the potentially explosive gases thing. Typically in storytelling, this is what you would call a Chekhov's gun situation, where you introduce the idea of something happening to put it into your audience's mind for use later. Last issue, when Maverick referenced looking at the different pipes in the tunnels as he was going down and identifying which was which, that was Gonzalez telling us this is going to be important and it's going to play a role in the story. Rather than this ending with Maverick flooding the tunnels, I kind of feel like this should have ended with Maverick blowing up some of the tunnels. Maybe he grabs Elena, gets out, and then, I don't know, fires off one of his plasma blasts into the gases, specifically hoping to ignite them and catching Creed in the conflagration. I don't know, it just bothers me that we had this continually reinforced to us, but then there's no consequences for breathing those gases, nor do they ever explode, despite the fact that they probably should have exploded a couple times in this fight. I do appreciate Maverick coming into this fight with plans, notably his shock needles and the power booster. I also like Maverick using the pipes around him to his advantage. Again, Gonzalez playing up Maverick's tactical nature. Plus, this move was set up last issue, as I mentioned before, so while it was totally telegraphed, I'm glad that Gonzalez at least took the time to set it up. The dialogue that we get between Sabretooth and Maverick is pretty uninspired, but it is not bad. And the only lettering problem that I caught was 2 narration boxes near the end. Gonzalez typically uses 2 forms of narration in this book. One of them is the author speaking to the audience, which is usually done to set the scene, and the other is Maverick narrating to himself. Maverick's boxes are usually all black with white text, and it looks cool and it feels fitting for the character somehow. The author's boxes are, at least in this issue, green with black lettering. After Maverick floods the tunnels, there are 2 author boxes that are done as if they're Maverick's boxes. This is the least egregious lettering error so far, so thank you, Jesus. We might just see a perfectly lettered issue of Maverick before we reach the end of it. I'm also intrigued as to this new development between Maverick and Elena. We know that Elena psionically saved Maverick from death, the act of which jump-started his powers. but twice now we've seen Elena's pain echo in Maverick. And once Elena drops into her coma, Maverick's control over his powers decreases. Was Elena, I don't know, like unconsciously providing Maverick with energy through their mental link, which allowed his powers to stabilize? With her in a coma now, is he going to continue to get worse? While I may not have loved this fight, I love the questions that it's left me with. After the battle spectaculars that the past 3 issues have been, Maverick versus Blob, then Elena versus Sabretooth, and now Maverick versus Sabretooth, issue 8 is going to slow things down for our lead character. But not for us. We follow the Confessor, last seen back in pre-unification Germany in Maverick issue 2, as he makes his way to the Icebox. The Icebox is a maximum security prison in Canada's frigid northwestern territories. The sheer distance from civilization plays a big role in deterring escapees, but it does little to sway the driven assassin. He first approaches on a snowmobile, then ditches that for skis. The Confessor nears 2 guards and lifts his ski pole. The bottom opens up and fires on the guards, killing them silently. As he continues to work his way into the prison, the author's narration tells us a little bit more about him. The Confessor has been on Interpol's wanted list for decades, but they have never come close to catching him. He was trained since birth to become an assassin and interrogator for the KGB, although since the fall of the Soviet Union he has gone freelance. His weapons and costume are designed after religious iconography, which is meant to disarm and shock his opponents. This makes his targets easier to kill. He doesn't speak throughout this assault. He remains cool, calm, and efficient. This scene not only establishes how the Confessor behaves in combat, but it also serves to reintroduce him to us. Remember, the flashback that we initially saw the Confessor in was set before Eastern and Western Berlin unified. So, at the time of publication, it was 7 years since the Confessor was last active. Despite that time gap, though, the Confessor appears to have lost none of his edge or skills. He's also doing a job, but we'll catch up on that in a minute. First, we go to the home of the Johnsons, where we find Maverick next to Elena's bandaged form. She's hooked up to oxygen, a drip feed, and life monitors. Bandages litter her body and her left arm is in a cast. Maverick bears his own wrappings, although his encircle his forearms and hands. Those hands are clasped together as Maverick is lost in thought, allowing Brian to enter the room unnoticed. He startles Maverick, totally accidentally, and then asks after Elena. Maverick goes over the basic list of injuries, like I just gave you, but it's really the coma that worries him the most. The longer that she stays in the coma, the more likely that she'll suffer brain damage. But there's no physical reason for the coma, it's psychosomatic. Elena could come out of it tomorrow. Or never. Brian asks what Maverick will do if that's the case, and Maverick has no good answer for him. Maverick moves to the kitchen a short while later, where he chats with Brian's parents. He thanks them for taking Elena in while she recovers, but they're all too happy to do it. After everything that he has done for them and their son, they are eager to repay him even a little bit. Plus, Rose was a physical therapist in her last life, so once Elena recovers, she'll already have a trainer waiting. Then she hands him a small lunch for Brian and he's outing. The initial scene with Brian is both a catch-up on Elena's condition, and it establishes how Maverick is planning to take care of her. This conversation with Brian's parents does a little bit of the same, but it also helps to add some depth to them. We finally get to see them interact with Maverick. Most of his interactions have only been with Brian, except for a phone call in issue 3 when they told him about Brian running away to New York? It's cool to see them kind of absorbing Maverick into their family too. Rose actually refers to him as Brian's Uncle David at one point. He has done so much for them, saving Brian from the Friends of Humanity twice and helping them to relocate and find new jobs. Maverick even mentions getting Rose's physical therapy certification reinstated so that she can practice again, so he isn't even done helping them. I won't lie, If a costumed mercenary asked me to take in a comatose woman who was nearly killed by a psychopath with enhanced senses who carries a grudge, I would probably say no. But not the Johnsons. Nah, bring her in. We got a spare room. Sure, why not? We love guests. Man, are the Johnsons nice people. We follow Maverick and Brian to Laguna Park, a big outdoor park near the Johnsons' home. For laughs, I looked up Laguna Park just to see if there actually was one at some point in Altamont Springs, but the closest that I found was in Tampa. But that's okay, not everything has to be real. This is a comic book about people with superpowers. The two men take a rowboat out onto the lake, Brian handling the oars since Maverick's hands are bandaged. Brian starts the conversation off by apologizing for blowing up about Maverick's remission. Yeah, Maverick's withholding did hurt him, and it made him think that he was only hanging out with Brian because of pity. But then he realized that Maverick was only trying to protect him from a painful truth. Brian does the same with his own family, which is ultimately what led to his revelation here. Maverick says that Brian is being really understanding about it, and that he appreciates that. He still should have told Brian the truth to begin with, though, even if it's a moot point now. Maverick then explains about his confrontation with Sabretooth, the deal with Elena and their psionic link, and the sudden change in his powers. When Maverick charges up now, his hands can't process the energy. They overcharge and literally burn, hence his own set of bandages. He also guesses that, yes, his psionic link with Elena was what was stabilizing his legacy virus infection and his mutation. But that link was severed when Elena fled from Sabretooth's mind, and so now Maverick is relapsing. I would like to feel proud for guessing about the Maverick/Elena link, but I'm going to guess that I probably remembered it just way back in the cobwebs of my brain. It is nice to have all of this mumbo-jumbo summed up and presented as one idea, although I am a bit annoyed that we lose story space to have it told to us. However, this scene also serves as a nice bonding moment between Maverick and Brian, who spend nearly almost no time together outside of Maverick saving his life several times. This scene feels more like two friends who are coming closer, which is something that has really been lacking in this pair's relationship. Back in Canada, in the Icebox, the Confessor has created a series of diversions. He has not only blown up Docking Bay 7, my favorite docking bay, but he did enough structural damage to free some of the inmates from the prison. The box's security forces focus on that, hoping to quell a riot instead of hunting down the cause of that damage, and that frees up the Confessor to finish his mission. In the depths of the box, the Confessor blows open a cell. The inmate asks if he's here to free him, or is he here to kill him? The Confessor states that the inmate's master feels that he has been sufficiently punished. He is coming home. Nikolai Vronsky leans out of the cell, his long tongue hanging out of his mouth. A wicked red scar runs over his left eye. Please, comrade, call him Sequel. The Johnson household is a regular hotspot as Maverick and Brian return to it. There's a car in the driveway that wasn't there before, and it puts Maverick on edge. But as they go inside, he's shocked to find Isabel Ferguson and her daughter, Madeline. What is she doing here? What about all that stuff about her ex-husband, Michel, about taking Maddie away if she kept working with Maverick? Ah, Isabel replies, Michel doesn't want Isabel working with Maverick, and she isn't here working. She's on vacation. She and Maddie are hitting up the theme parks. Isabel figured that she would look in on her good friends, the Johnsons and Elena, at the same time. How could Michelle have a problem with that? You know, Marvel Boy had references to Disney World, too. This is the second series that I've talked about that had references to the Mouse's Kingdom and Marvel's future owner. Coincidence, perhaps? Or conspiracy? And just in case you're wondering, this is a blatant nod to Disney World and not Universal Studios or any of the other theme parks in Central Florida. Isabel and Maddie both have stuffed animals with them that are terribly miscolored, most likely to avoid copyright claims with this issue, and Isabel also wears a shirt that has Mickey's cartoon face on it. The Johnsons are happy to finally meet Isabel, especially Brian, who outright calls her Maverick's Q. This leads to Frank joining the conversation, as he's an engineer himself. Maverick actually helped him to get a job at Cybertech Industries, who do contract work for NASA, actually. The now extra-large group of folks chat, they eventually eat dinner, and Isabel finds Maverick outside afterwards. She asks him to come back in. She has a surprise for him before she leaves. They go inside, and Isabel presses a button on her stroller. A compartment on the bottom slides out, revealing a box with Maverick's mask design on it. She figured that he would need a new set of armor, so ta-da! Isabel even upgraded it with the latest Kevlar and lightweight armor. Nice! Maverick shows off the new armor to Brian, minus the gauntlets. Until he's able to get his powers under control, there's no sense to wearing them. When he charges up, he'll just keep burning through them. He suggests to Brian that he adopts a code name when they talk over the chatterboxes. They are supposed to be secure, yes, but just in case someone does crack them, they need to protect Brian's identity. He also says that they should use these names when they're in the field, which is a line that totally throws me. Maverick has done nothing to indicate that Brian will ever be working with him, nor has Brian indicated a need or a want to do so. Sure, when he was training at the X-Mansion, Brian was pumped to be an X-Man someday, maybe, but he clearly didn't stick with it. There was no, oh, you've got the legacy virus kid GTFO moment. Brian got control of his powers, learned about the legacy virus, and then decided to go home. He chose to return to a normal life to enjoy what time he had. Does he even want to go on missions? And are his parents cool with that? Because Brian can barely handle being a mutant and being sick, much less being on dangerous missions where he'll have to shock the ever-loving crap out of people. I won't lie, I would love to see Brian become an X-Man or a hero in his own right, but there is no way that he's emotionally equipped for that right now. Maverick suggests that Brian take the name of Static, but he thinks that it's already been taken. I believe that this is a reference to the character Static Shock, who also has electrical powers. Brian suggests Bolt, and that's fine with Maverick. He doesn't really care, he's just trying to protect the kid's identity. He then asks Brian to watch over Elena while he's overseas. With the specter of death hanging over him once more, Maverick has questions that he wants answered. But to get those answers, he needs to pay Ivan Pushkin a visit. Pushkin is also the Confessor's employer, having hired him to retrieve Sickle. He has dropped Sickle at one of Pushkin's safe houses, and then goes to Moscow to meet with the man himself. The job is done, and he wants to get paid. And do not worry, my friend. Pushkin was so pleased with the Confessor's work that he has already wired him the money with a bonus. You see, he has another job for him. His target? Why, it's Maverick, of course. But let's back up. I like Isabel's visit with the Johnsons. Her loyalty to Maverick is super endearing, and I think that he needs all of the support that he can get after losing Elena. Given her headstrong nature, I like that Isabel won't allow her ex to dominate her life, too. If her friend needs her, then she's going to help him, dang it. I also like how her visit draws out more details about the Johnsons, specifically Frank. In one issue, I have learned more about the Johnsons than all the rest of this book so far. And that's fine. It's not like they're the leading characters in this book. It's just nice to see them more than something more than just worried parents. They feel more like people now, with lives outside of Maverick and his ongoings, or Brian's mutant problems, and I think that that's a good thing. This ending with Pushkin and the Confessor should feel ominous, but honestly, their dialogue is so playful that it doesn't really sell that at all. This issue does so much work to reestablish the Confessor as a dangerous, skilled warrior, but he lacks any personality, depth, or panache. Sure, he has this religious look to him, but so what? Who cares? He isn't a man of the cloth, and his allying with Pushkin feels way less important. I don't fear or respect the Confessor at all, although I do have a decent amount of respect for Pushkin. Whatever he's planning here, it's sure to be a challenge for Maverick, especially given his recent developments. Maverick tells Brian that he isn't rushing into some foolish vendetta, but I kinda think that he is. Jim Cheung draws the scenes with the Confessor and the initial 2 pages with Maverick and Brian, but little else in this issue. Leo Fernandez continues to be the main artist for the Brian-related scenes, both for issues 7 and 8. I like that consistency that Cheung gets the action sequences and Fernandez gets the quiet scenes. If you're going to have 2 different, or even more than 2, but at least 2, different artists on one book, then dividing up the storylines to each of them I think is the best way to do it. Fernandez's artwork is still in general uneven, and you would think that after 3 months of drawing Brian that Fernandez would have mastered him by now, but that's not the case. These pages still work, as Fernandez's style is similar enough to Cheung's overall, but they aren't grand. This was a nice catch-your-breath style issue. I mean, we've caught up with our main cast, we've caught up with our main villains, we've rearmed Maverick, and we can now pivot our narrative into our final 4 issues. Maverick still suspects that his now-dead old friend Major Barrington had something to do with his wife Janetta, a question left hanging since issue 3. Getting an answer for it, though, means confronting Maverick's past, as well as the Confessor and Ivan Pushkin. Join me next week for the first part of Red Rain. Everyone, there are a million podcasts vying for your time and attention, and I'd like to thank you for listening to mine. If you would like to get in touch with me, to share a concern, request a series, compliment me, berate me, whatever you like, send me an email at cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Otherwise, thanks for listening.